He is the chosen one. You must see it.
I gave Qui-Gon my word.
Is he the chosen one?
He is.
And it is the Jedi who will stand in the way of peace.
It's not whether or not we fight.
It's how we choose to fight that matters.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
The Force will be with you, always.
And I will not be the last Jedi.
This is The World Between Worlds, a Star Wars podcast where we have been marathoning all of Star Wars in chronological order, leading up to the rise of Skywalker, and right now we're spending time with none of the Skywalkers, unless you count Lando as Uncle Skywalker. Two cute little episodes here that we're talking about of Star Wars Rebels. The first is called The Idiot's Array. Vision of Hope is the second episode.
We've got like two guys, like two big boys in these episodes.
You could call it the Two Big Boys arc.
The Big
Please
Boys
do.
arc.
We're here to talk about Star Wars Rebels. My name's Yates.
My name's Jordan.
My name is Jessica.
My name is Jonas.
That was lame. That's the lamest fake name bit so far.
My name is Keith.
Is that like a Jonas Brothers
bit.
reference?
Oh,
Weezer.
Oh, whatever. Jonas Brothers is better.
In the very first episode, Idiot's Array, the Ghost crew, through happenstance, comes upon Lando Calrissian, and just like our buddy previously, Han Solo, they lose to Lando in a card game and are stuck doing a job they don't really want to do with Lando. Terrible things happen, and there's a really cute pig, and laser fights Lando. This is Idiot's Array.
Who are the idiots?
The Idiot's Array is...
the card move.
It's the card move. It's the hand.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I think in...
It's also a metaphor.
Because everyone's an idiot.
Oh.
It's an array of idiots.
Yes. I guess Lando's presence kind of like...
Turns them into idiots.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the
He's
thing.
definitely in control.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay, now I'm liking it more.
Oh, okay, great.
'Cause that-
Expound.
This is why talking helps.
I was like, okay, card game again. This dude has got one move. But now I'm like, oh, this is his move. He turns everyone into a fool around him in order to pull off his shit, which is much cooler than just a card game.
Oh, you're quite the pilot. That's the smoothest takeoff I've had in years.
And you're quite the smooth-talking smuggler.
Smuggler, such a small word. I'm more of a galactic entrepreneur. That means business person.
I know what it means.
So there's a couple points throughout the episode where Lando also is just kind of like, it sounds like it was all part of Lando's plan to try
Play
and like,
them.
Yeah, to play them.
In both of these episodes, Hera knew what was up the whole time.
Hera's awesome. But it also made sense the way she dealt with it in both instances. Because just the Ghost crew is always like up against the odds, and she always plays it. You know, there's a reason she doesn't show her whole hand until, later in the episodes in each time.
Her hand as in card game?
Yes. More metaphors.
Mental card game.
Jordan, why don't you talk a bit about seeing Lando in this context when we've seen him so recently in Solo?
His voice is really deep now.
Circumstances change.
Circumstances change.
That's hardly fair.
He had some weird shit going on with his eyebrows and like.
Yeah,
I think
it's
that was
kind
just
of
the
like
animation.
Yeah,
His
he was like over
weird.
animated.
It was all
He was
like,
over-animated.
I can't
Like-
control my mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was definitely like they were like, how do we make this character more charming than the average character on the show? And their solution was just like animate the hell out of his eyebrows and lips and like just like his eyes. Like let's make him like as expressive as possible. And sometimes, yeah, it's very distracting.
I kind of liked it though. I mean, even in like the original movies with Billy D. Williams, he was like a charmer, but he was never like the most charming person on screen. Like even the animation, I thought was fine. Like because it was overexpressive, I thought that was like a good thing. Like I liked how different he was and more charismatic than he was in any of his other iterations.
I felt like they didn't know how to translate him into an animated character. Like they made him a caricature.
Like, are you talking about writing wise or just like the way he
No,
looks
that like
visually?
just visually.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, a little bit of the writing wise too. I felt like it was a little over the top, but I also felt like 15 minutes in, I was like starting to get used to it.
It definitely, I do think it does feel like a caricature, but the way they use him in the story is like, he's like of a totally different like world and mentality than like all the other characters. And like, I'm sure the story breaking meeting when they figured out what this episode's going to be is just quite as simple as what happens when the Ghost Crew meets Lando. And that's what they thought up to do, which, you know, I still think they made a bunch of strange choices. But in terms of how Lando affects the crew and the dynamics and like emotionally, I thought that part worked about the story.
I do like the design and stuff though.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool.
I like that he like understood like art.
They did a bunch
he could
of
read like
I liked it at
situations.
that part.
That was also like a cool bit of world building, just like
Yeah.
because we know Sabine's an artist, but like what does that mean? And then like Lando walks in and it's just like they're talking about like art history and stuff, which is really cool. And that's the first time that's happened in Star Wars.
And that makes sense given his character as being like a lover of the finer things in life. Like I feel like at that scene I was like, okay, I'm starting to like get used to this and like the purpose of this, but at first it was just like kind of fan servicey and like a not well done way.
Maybe it fell off because he wasn't wearing a cape.
It's a lot of capes.
Maybe too many capes.
That was it.
That was it. I thought overall the presentation of the character was like made sense in terms of the timeline, but it's definitely different than the Lando and Solo. Like this Lando
Yeah.
seems,
It was a jump.
Yeah, it
But
was,
I mean,
it
this
was
is
a
like,
jump.
how many years is this?
This was made like 3 years before
No,
Solo.
I meant
4
like
years.
in world years, like between
In
Solo.
universe, I think it's like got to be like 6 or 7 years after Solo. So he's probably in his early 30s at this point.
I liked what they did with him in terms of the story. Like the easiest thing that they could have done would be like, oh, we know Lando likes to gamble and that he plays card games. Let's have the whole episode be about card games and gambling. So like the fact that they had him like starting to weave into like his mineral company and like the best like how that ties into Bespin with like oil refineries and stuff, or it's like right in the center of like his gambling life and then his like business life.
Yeah,
so I thought this was like a cool point.
The way I interpreted
That's cool.
it is I feel like he's like bouncing back from, and it's cool because in Solo this is how we meet the character as well.
Listen, last I checked, me and Crimson Dawn were squared away. Dryden said all was forgiven after I did the whole Felucia thing for him.
Yeah, new move. We're making the Kessel Run. We need a ship.
Why didn't you just say so?
I thought you were retired.
Circumstances change.
We find him here in a similar situation where like he's maybe just cleared his debts, or maybe, you know, there's a new looming debt coming his way. And so now he's like perhaps trying to get out of the smuggling lifestyle and do something a little bit more to where we see him in Empire Strikes Back, where it seems like he's
Like a
starting to
business
settle down.
owner?
Yeah, he's just like, how about I just have a clean business?
Yeah.
I look for minerals.
Well,
like
it's technically not clean.
It's
but-
still illegal because the Empire has outlawed it on Lothal. And I also think that's kind of like a plot point that they bring up later. Is like
I love
always
that
yeah.
like little detail of where it's like, oh, the Empire doesn't like private property owners like mining because it's getting in the way of like their mining.
Yeah.
I thought that was just like a little cool detail there.
Yeah, I agree.
Is he on Lothal?
Yeah, he's on Lothal at the
Oh,
end, so he's like there, presumably for
Yeah.
the foreseeable future. He's
Yeah,
there
he's just
with
there.
on the planet
That's
while the
cool.
other rebels are there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I
sure.
want to see him with the little pig, like mining around, going around, sniffing things.
You want to talk about the pig? I think everyone liked the pig.
I love the pig.
The pig was cute.
It
so
was
cute.
There
I
was
loved
a
it.
few moments that were super corny, like when the pig blew up and like bounced on the heads of the stormtrooper. Or they weren't stormtroopers; they were like bodyguards.
troopers,
or
Mosquito
whatever.
troopers.
Yeah, I like their design. They look weird.
They look
What
so
are
cool.
they?
I like them.
They had like mosquito heads. Like,
I liked
it was
all the new
weird.
designs in this episode.
Yeah.
Even what was the main guy's name?
As Morgan.
As Morgan. He looked like a
comes
Buzz
back.
Lightyear villain.
Buzz.
Yeah, he does.
What about the whole like droid aspect of the episode?
Oh, I liked that because it kind of and this is something that's brought up in Solo, people's lives and allegiances just being like bought and traded away. And I was like, that's how the episode starts off, and it's just like you introduce a character like Lando, and you're talking about making it all about gambling and stuff. Because in a way, the whole episode kind of was still about that, because the whole impetus
In a
for
background sense.
in it, but yeah, but the everything happens because they inadvertently sell Chopper away, and like now Lando owns Chopper. You never really get the impression throughout the episode that he's gonna stay with Lando.
Yeah.
Just because they don't treat it like too seriously.
So something he's like holding like.
Yeah. But then thematically, they also tie it over again to like when Hera is taken away, and that's like, you know, in Lando's world, like lives are traded all the time, and like that's what he's used to. He's like, I'm gonna get Chopper. And I'm going to use Chopper to get Hera to Morgan. You know, that's how he works.
Yeah,
he's like lining people up. This episode sort of reintroduces, and it's kind of really mean-spirited too, because it's Lando that does it, which, you know, it doesn't sit right with me. Of course, he's like, Hera's going to break out anyway. But, you know, it reintroduces the idea of like human trafficking in Star Wars again. And we talked about this briefly in Solo.
Wherever we go, it can't be worse than where we've been.
Yes, it can. Out there, we've got no protection. We could get snatched up by traffickers, sold to Crimson Dawn or the Hutt cartel.
That's not gonna happen.
This is actually something that we had talked about pretty in depth previously when we were recording our discussion on Solo. Particularly when it comes to Solo, it's like, is that part of Kira's backstory? Jessica posited it seems like that could be a very real world part of her backstory that's sort of written in the margins. The movie mentions multiple times that Kira's, you know, running away from something horrible that happened to her in her past, and it ended up becoming a very large conversation that I didn't want to just post onto Solo. And I wanted to find the right opportunity to bring it up again. And sure enough, in this episode, the subject is brought up again. So I want to dedicate a little bit more time to talk about this directly. Jessica, you really brought it up, like even in like Return of the Jedi with a Leia bikini. Like this is like an old concept of just like selling characters away into servitude, and particularly like the women. And in this case, it was Hera, and you know, it's part of the world that, you know, slavery exists and like characters are bought and traded.
Don't forget about Anakin.
And don't forget about Anakin. But in the
it's like sexualized with women.
Yeah,
it's sex slavery.
It's like for women, it's like part of this
prostitution.
Yeah, in the subtext of the other movies, I feel like that's like the subtext, but in this episode of this children's show is like the most direct acknowledgement of it, when Hera's like basically like offering to sleep with Morgan as part of like her plan to get him
really
to knock
creepy.
him out.
Perhaps you'd like me to serve you?
Yes. Good practice for you. Serve me. Yeah, be quick about it.
And perhaps you'd prefer to dine alone?
Oh, yes. Go! Leave us!
I think what's creepy about it also is that, like, it's almost in a way done where it's like, wow, this is so empowering to women. Because, like, look, Hera just, like, knocked him out. Like, she was, like, supposed to be the prostitute, and then she, like, makes her escape. So
isn't that so cool?
Like,
we should be so happy.
It's like, wow, what a badass chick. I want to be just like her.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean...
I don't want to be sold into sex slavery.
Yeah.
Like, right. It's kind of just like, that's just kind of like it's just a kid's show, but that's just brought up like in a very casual,
I guess like it's like innocent
way.
for those kids' minds because they're not
Yeah,
aware of the issue.
They don't know what's happening.
But we see it in a different light.
It says more about adults.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because you gotta remember it's adults writing this, so
yeah,
they know.
I mean, yeah, definitely. They know what they're doing.
For those adults, they're not like, is this inappropriate? Like to bring up in the context of a kids show? Because it's just more of like gritty world building instead of like an actual thing.
Yeah, but it's also treated so nonchalantly in the episode too. It's like really
right. It's true with a lot of things in Star Wars. Like
yeah,
we were
definitely.
talking about before, like, you know, slavery of other types and killing in general and war.
I think they got away with it because she wasn't like in a bikini or anything, and then she got away immediately.
They also like played up how disgusting he was, and they even like got Hera to react to it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine like if this was executed at its worst, where it's just like Hera in a bikini, and then they're saying like back and forth coded messages.
Like that's the whole episode.
Yeah, that's the whole plot.
That would be like
I guess
unacceptable.
that would be unacceptable. Yeah, well, because it would be a kid's show.
Yeah, the writers were like, okay, how far can we take this?
I don't know how I feel about the decision in this at the end of the day, because I feel like because Star Wars is a universe where there's like started off for kids and then like
I mean, not really.
I mean, the first movie,
but like,
then it gets
so
gradually more.
There's a lot of graphic stuff in that. I mean, you got like burnt Baru and Uncle Owen.
Yeah, that's true.
You got chopped off arm with like blood everywhere.
Yeah.
It's pretty graphic.
It's for everyone.
It's so weird with like children's stuff. Because I mean, like I was reading this Neil Gaiman like young adult novel called The Graveyard Book, and it's pretty dark and graphic. I mean, the first like scene in the book is like this kid's parents getting murdered by like this guy with like a knife, and I'm like,
I mean, a lot of
kid.
children's things are really dark, like from cartoons to even like nursery rhymes and lullabies, are dark.
Yeah, like what's it?
Ring Around the Rosie.
Ring Around the Rosie. Yeah,
the bubonic plague.
Yeah. One thing when I find like messy, I guess politically and just like in general, also from a storytelling point of view, about like sex trafficking in Star Wars or like anything like that, is like about being so explicit about it too, is like the story creates like, and this is like consistent throughout most science fiction, like the story creates barriers through which we can experience something in perhaps a less harmful or traumatic way.
Right.
By building metaphors. And we talked about this before of like, in Star Wars, like, does racism exist by like skin color?
The Empire doesn't hire people that aren't human.
Yeah.
Like except for Thrawn, he's an exception, made by the Emperor.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. If like, that exists in Star Wars, and like that's like that's a story that people in the world now understand because of their skin color in the real world, not because they're an alien. How do you tell a story like? How do you tell a story like this? And the same thing, like I think you were bringing up before when we were talking about Solo, and like how human trafficking is part of that story as well, and that might be part of the subtext of that story, is like in Star Wars, like slavery, like as it existed thousands of years ago, exists like as a reality, everyday reality for some characters. So drawing an immediate analog to modern day slavery and human trafficking, that becomes like, in my opinion, I think like that's where like some of the messy stuff comes in, because you're living in you're trying to have it both ways. Like you're trying to like create a fantasy world where like we can experience like characters being oppressed or have horrible things happen to them in a way where there's distance. And then you're also trying to now with the new stories, and you know, they do this in other examples too, but have it be more direct. And so I think that's where it kind of gets a little muddy for me, like where I'm just like.
But also to like go back to where we are in Rebels right now, it's also like, this is really interesting. Like it's also really a completely different thing to introduce racism into like a movie or into like an expanded cinematic universe like this, where it's like you have it in film media, you have it in book media and show media. So it's like if you did bring it into Star Wars in like the same way you would bring it into any other movie, how do we match the same tone of racism in this story, but also like blend this story with the other stories we've been telling?
Well, and that's why I think they decided to make it more explicit in this, where like Hera basically, you know, without saying it because it's a TV show, offers as Morgan sex, and I was like, whoa. So it was always, this type of stuff is like always an undercurrent, especially in Return of the Jedi, where they just like introduce the idea of like Jabba has a slave and she wears a bikini. Like, what's that about? How many things are that possibly about? And like now it's like well, yeah, but now because it's part of the world, like the second you put it under a microscope, like now it's just like obvious.
The problem is Star Wars amplifies itself. Yeah. It's like Return of the Jedi, it was an undercurrent, therefore it's an undercurrent within the entire reality.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
But also it would, like, I feel like this reality would be so different if that didn't exist within this reality. Like, I just feel like it, of course it exists.
You mean like if Star Wars Rebels didn't?
Like having sex slaves for these like crime bosses and stuff like that. Like, I mean, it just wouldn't, I don't want to say it wouldn't work, but like it's just, that seems so realistic within this world that kind of thing would exist. I mean, I think though that's something that people love about Star Wars, is that it portrays the graphic, gritty parts of our own world within the context of sci-fi, whereas something like Star Trek is like more utopian and like philosophical, and it's not really like a commentary on like the gritty parts of our world and space.
In Vision of Hope, Ezra gets a vision of the future where him and the Ghost Crew are fighting alongside the character of Gall Trayvis. And Trayvis is a character that has been on the show as sort of like a part of the world building, but like as just like a minor character in the background that we know about because he's famous.
This is Senator in exile, Gall Trayvis. I bring more news the Empire doesn't want you to hear.
What's a Gall Trayvis? The only member of the Imperial Senate with the courage to speak out publicly against the Empire.
a senator or a former senator, I'm not sure, that's speaking out against the Empire, that has all these pirate broadcasts, much like Ezra's parents did when Ezra was growing up. Ezra gets what he wants, meeting Mr. Trayvis, and, don't meet your heroes, because it's not going to go as you expect.
You're with the Empire?
But all your transmissions, those planets you visited, how did word not get out about you?
Because no one ever knew, not even my own droids. Insurgents are not arrested, they're identified and watched. The troublesome ones have accidents after I'm gone.
But you're not a traitor. You're a voice of freedom, a light in the darkness, like my parents.
Parents? No one has spoken against the Empire on Lothal since the Bridger transmissions.
I also liked how they bring it full circle with how Trayvis was doing the
what his parents
radio
were doing?
Signals, and that's what his parents were doing, and also that's a fucking cool thing. I mean, we talked about that in the last episode.
Yeah, I mean, mainly I think it was the whole point of the episode was just about Ezra sort of getting a bit of a dose of reality. And, it's really funny when I think it was 2 episodes ago when we were talking about the character of Trayvis, and then Jessica was yeah, I don't trust him.
I think it's a falsified person that the Empire might have created.
We thought that it was him,
but it wasn't.
But then it ended up being a false report. So does that mean that everything he does is false, or just that one?
I don't remember if it specifies that. Anyway, I was just trying to steer the conversation away from that, but it didn't work.
And I felt that strongly in this episode too. I'm I don't trust his eyebrows. There's something weird about his face. Once again, Star Wars optics.
Yes. It was in a smart way, as smart as Rebels gets when it comes to giving information that adults probably would be able to pick up on pretty quickly, but it's also subtle enough, it would kind of go over most kids' heads.
Yeah.
And the kids would kind of be where Ezra is, where we, much like Hera, we are okay, I know what this guy's after. He's asking them all these questions about what their infrastructure is, and he's afraid of going in the sewer and stuff like that.
When he said surrender.
I don't want to let it off that easy, though. I don't want to think, just because I'm an adult, that means, I should know the twist.
I mean, but a lot of it's, very kid-centric. He knows where my parents is, and then the music's dun, dun, dun. Kids are going to be But for me, I literally laughed at it, if you heard me. It was so overly dramatic.
Okay, so you think it was, it was, trying to cater to, in an ironic sense?
I think it was mainly to shock kids.
Yeah. But you're saying at the same time to kind of wink at the adults of look how much we're playing this up.
I thought it was more like what you're saying, Keats. Whenever basically they were leaving breadcrumbs for Ezra.
They were leaving
Ezra
bread.
didn't.
Full loaf.
there was at least 4 or 5 moments where it was relatively obvious that Trayvis was lying to Ezra. And I just thought, for me, I felt that was the team winking at the adults, whereas that felt to me it was overly obvious for us to be able to figure it out.
I don't think it was overly obvious.
I think it was obvious.
I thought it was overly obvious. I thought what would be cool is if they did a thing where it's Hera and Kanan don't trust him, and they try to tell Ezra that they don't trust him, and then Ezra's no, I believe in him. And then it's a conflict with
Palpatine.
them. Exactly.
I guess Trayvis just isn't as cool as Palpatine.
I think his riddle was so basic too. It was so easy to.
Well, that's what Kanan even says.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, I don't know, all of it felt very realistic for me in terms of how the adults react to the situation, i.e. Kanan and Hera predominantly, and then how Ezra the kid reacts to the situation. I thought it was, in that way, it was pretty obvious, and I totally understood where all the characters
Maybe it was
were.
a message where it was kids don't always believe everything adults tell you, because he totally believed the kid.
It was a really cool message about the Force too, of and just as all of us people, in the real world who are trying to trust the Force, trust our lives and stuff. You're trying to trust your gut, but you don't always know if that's right. You don't always know if your intuition is your guide or if it's just you having wishful thinking. Mm-hmm. That's, to me, very true to life.
Yeah, I did like that. And, the ending of the episode is, where Hera basically says, I know we were wrong because we hoped that he would be good.
I wanted to believe in Trayvis as much as you did.
Yeah, what's wrong with us?
We have hope. Hope that things can get better. And they will.
For me, like, I think the point of the ending, and it's also kind of like a setup for the finale, which I'm very excited to watch, but it's just like, just the notion that the crew is like alone, you know, like just really hammering that in, just That's like true. It was a surprise to Trayvis, but then also like it's like surprising to Ezra too. It's like, wow, like we're more alone than I thought we were, and
Sabine
that's like
even
really.
Says, she was like, "Is anybody on our side?"
Yeah. And I thought that was really cool, and you know, it's like, as the show exists now, it's like part of the character's reality that they're like always on their own. They can never stay in one place too long, and just like, you know, it's not just hope that one day the Empire is going to be gone. It's just like hope for like that they can trust people. And I thought that just was really human and a cool theme for the show.
I definitely think that this week's like biggest strength was its dialogue. Like I thought that this episode had a lot of really good stuff, especially, and I think one of you two said it, especially with like Chopper. Chopper was like utilized really well in these 2 episodes.
Yeah, I liked Chopper in these episodes.
They put a lot of different elements into each episode, and it makes it more interesting. Like,
yeah, like you could have taken any one of the elements from the second episode like out, and it probably would have been less interesting. But it still would have been, there would have been a lot going on. But like, so you have like the political thing, you have the fact that the characters, the Empire's like getting smart and trying to set up our heroes.
Right. The stuff with his dad. And then the fact that there's a Force vision, like
you get to see that one scene of Callus like saying like, hey, you know, don't tell the Grand Inquisitor, but I'm gonna try and do my thing.
The Inquisitor says,
I believe the Inquisitor has put too much emphasis on the capture of the Jedi. Our attention should be on the rebels as a group. We catch my rebels, we catch his Jedi.
It was funny, when I was watching it, I was thinking of you, because that's what you said on the previous episode that we recorded, where you're just like, I just wish there was more of like, it seems like these characters would have like a conflict of interest with each other, and this was a very good, that was a short but good example of it.
I really liked all the Old Republic stuff, like the building, the mural.
Yeah. I loved the mural on the wall of like the workers cutting the space wheat down. Yeah. That was my fucking shit. Yes! Workers rise! Farmers! No, I loved it.
Is that Hugh Jackman's Wolverine in pain screaming workers? He is a lumberjack, so he would say something like that.
No, I loved the mural. In fact, if you remember, there was the Clone Wars episode on Alderaan where there's also like an Alderaan mural in the Senate chamber.
It looked like the same room.
I do remember. Peek at the mural, but I did like how they incorporated like the old abandoned Republic building.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah,
it was
that
cool.
makes sense.
Yeah, good world building.
I never really, I mean, I noticed this a lot, but I never say it. But especially in this episode, I noticed like a lot of the background paintings for like when they're on the Old Republic building, you could see like the background with like little buildings and stuff like that. It's just really beautiful stuff. But yeah, this show is beautiful. And every time I hear you say like you love this show and that the show's the best, I'm just like, fuck. Can't wait for the next season.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be thinking like that like every season.
Just gets better.
Yeah.
Awesome. I can't believe that.
Yeah, I know.
It's really exciting.
It is pretty crazy, and I can't wait. So next week, we are wrapping up season 1 of Rebels and watching the first 2 episodes of season 2 as well. That is 5 Rebels episodes.
But you won't regret it.
You won't regret it. Things happen. Things fucking happen. Skywalker.
Oh my god, yes. Workers rise.
Pilot's rights.